Hollywood absolutely loves a disaster movie, but what happens when a movie treats one of history's greatest and most heartbreaking tragedies like a supernatural playground? Enter Titanic 3. Yes, you heard that right. Not Titanic 2, but Titanic 3. Because in the wild, chaotic, and completely unpredictable world of modern cinema, if a historical event kills over 1,500 people in real life, a fictional, greedy billionaire corporation will absolutely try to rebuild it just to make a quick buck from wealthy tourists. It is the ultimate testament to human stupidity and corporate greed, and this movie puts it on full display in the most terrifying way possible. The core premise of this film is beautifully unhinged and completely over the top. It takes the real-world horror of the legendary 1912 disaster, throws it into a blender with modern social media influencer culture, adds a corrupt black market artifact smuggling ring, and tops it all off with a heavy, brutal dose of supernatural vengeance from beyond the grave. If you came here looking for a historically accurate masterpiece or a deep, emotional romance like James Cameron's original classic, you are definitely in the wrong place. But if your idea of a good time is watching angry, reanimated corpses and vengeful spirits using telekinesis to decapitate ship engineers and drown billionaires, well, welcome aboard, because this movie is an absolute, chaotic rollercoaster from start to finish. Before we dive straight into the absolute madness of this plot and analyze how everything goes terribly wrong, do me a huge favor. Smash that subscribe button, turn on your notifications so you never miss another deep movie breakdown, and let's dismantle how this luxury cruise turned into a literal, floating bloodbath. To fully understand the madness of Titanic 3, we first have to look at how the movie sets up its timeline. The film actually begins by taking us all the way back to that fateful night in 1912. Amidst the chaos of the original sinking ship, we follow a young woman named Elizabeth who is desperately calling out into the freezing darkness for her fiancé, Charles. As the ship cracks and groans under the pressure of the ocean, the captain forcefully pushes her into a lifeboat to save her life. But this is a horror movie, so safety is never an option. As the lifeboat is being lowered, the heavy cables suddenly snap, flipping the boat and dumping everyone into the sub-zero water. Elizabeth manages to survive the initial impact and climbs onto the overturned boat, shivering and screaming for Charles once again. To her utter shock, he answers her from a nearby iceberg. He dives into the water to swim to her, and just as Elizabeth reaches out her hand, a horrifying, golly reanimated corpse bursts from the dark waves, grabs her by the wrist, and drags her down into the freezing abyss. This terrifying opening sequence sets the rules for the rest of the film, proving that the spirits of the Atlantic are not at peace, and they are hungry for blood. Flash forward exactly 110 years later, and humanity has learned absolutely nothing from history. A massive, state-of-the-art luxury vessel named Titanic 3 embarks on its maiden voyage, sailing the exact same tragic route as its predecessor. To make the story feel relevant to today's younger audiences, the writers decided to throw a couple of mega-popular lifestyle bloggers into the absolute center of the mix, a couple named Mia and Jackson. These two characters have 12 million followers, their phones are permanently glued to their hands, they live stream every single second of their lives, and they are completely, blissfully oblivious to the fact that they are sailing on a deeply cursed vessel. When they first arrive at the docks, Jackson is in absolute awe of the massive ship, filming everything for his followers, while Mia complains about how corporate sponsors are shamelessly profiting off a historic tragedy where 1,500 people died. It is a hilarious, borderline satirical take on today's modern internet culture. While the fans surround them at the port for selfies, they smile and record an excited video, thinking this cruise is just another opportunity for viral content and high engagement metrics. Meanwhile, the internal politics of the ship are just as messy as the passengers. The vessel is commanded by Captain Rose, who introduces her highly specialized crew. Because this is an elite cruise, she has brought along an extra layer of security led by Brian Andrews, a former Navy SEAL who has assembled a special team to ensure safety on board. Brian's team has to answer both to the captain and to Hector, the ship's official head of security. The captain explains that this extra firepower is absolutely necessary because, in addition to the massive crowd of wealthy elite passengers, the ship is transporting a priceless collection of real artifacts and relics recovered directly from the original Titanic wreck site. As the ship officially leaves the port and hits the open sea, the wealthy passengers celebrate on the upper decks with champagne and live music. But deep within the dark corridors of the cargo hold, a mysterious young girl emerges from a large luggage trunk. She quietly navigates the lower decks, slips into a crew locker room, and steals a uniform to blend in. This girl isn't just a random stowaway looking for a free vacation. She is actually a direct descendant of Captain Edward Smith, the man who went down with the original ship in 1912. Over the loudspeaker, the crew's organizer, Julie McKenna, welcomes everyone and proudly announces that master craftsmen spent over 10 years meticulously replicating every single inch of the ship, with generous sponsors donating authentic items from the ocean floor. She promises that the next evening, Captain Rose will guide the ship to the exact resting place of the original disaster, where they will hold a solemn moment of silence to honor the dead. But honor is the last thing on the mind of Professor Cochrane, an absolute menace of a character who treats these sacred, cursed objects like he is running a cheap garage sale. The mysterious girl, now disguised as a crew member, sneaks into the ship's private museum room and picks up the legendary violin that supposedly played Nearer My God to Thee while the ship was fracturing. Professor Cochrane bursts into the room and immediately starts screaming at her, demanding she put it down. He boasts about how the violin lay at the bottom of the ocean for a century and is the most valuable piece in his private collection. The girl looks at him with pure hatred and points out a hairpin in a nearby cabinet, mentioning her great-grandmother had one just like it. She openly curses him, reminding him that ancient Egyptians were buried with their treasures, and anyone who desecrated those tombs was met with a brutal, painful death. Cochrane is irritated by her cryptic words and demands that Julie fire her immediately. But while they are distracted by the argument, the girl quietly steals the hairpin along with a rare coin and vanishes back into the shadows of the lower decks. As the night progresses, the grand gala concert begins in the luxury ballroom, but the energy on the ship takes a dark, supernatural turn. Down in the cargo hold, the mysterious girl prepares a dark, bloody ritual. She pulls out an old photograph of Captain Edward Smith, takes a sharp blade, and cuts her own hand, spilling her blood across the floor while chanting in, calling upon the spirits of death. At the exact same time, our blogger couple, Mia and Jackson, are wandering the lower corridors looking for unique content. They stumble into the room and witness the terrifying ritual in progress. Terrified by what they are seeing, they turn around to run, but the door slams shut with a violent bang. Suddenly, they are startled by Nancy, a crazed superfan who has been tracking their live stream and decided to follow them into the dark zones of the ship. As the girl finishes her blood ritual, the entire structural frame of the ship begins to vibrate and shake. The power grid flickers, and the blogger's live stream camera cuts out completely. Jackson realizes that things are getting way too dangerous and tells Mia and Nancy that they need to get as far away from this crazy ritual woman as possible. Meanwhile, up in her private cabin, Captain Rose is getting dressed for the gala while video chatting with her fiancé. Suddenly, the lights flicker intensely, the room temperature drops to a freezing chill, and her communication link is completely severed. The horror officially begins to hunt the passengers one by one. Out on the open deck, amidst a thick, unnatural fog that the radar can't seem to identify, Mia and Jackson are trying to record a backup video. Suddenly, a haunting, beautiful melody echoes through the mist. A ghostly figure holding a violin manifests right behind them. Mia, completely enchanted and brainwashed by the supernatural music, invites Jackson to dance with her. As they move, a terrifying, low-frequency sonic sound wave echoes through the ship. Mia clutches her head in absolute agony, begging for the noise to stop. Jackson is confused, completely unable to hear the frequency, and has no idea how to help her. As Mia screams, she fails to notice that the ghostly violinist is slowly pulling Jackson into the dense fog. Within seconds, Jackson vanishes into thin air, completely erased from the deck. When the horrific sound finally ceases, Mia opens her eyes, entirely disoriented, and realizes her husband is gone. She panics, picks up her phone, and decides to record a live video to tell her followers what just happened. But the spirits of the Titanic wreck do not believe in mercy or witnesses. The ghostly violinist appears right in front of her face, emits one final, lethal sonic screech, and liquefies her senses. Mia drops to the floor, instantly dead. The discovery of Mia's body throws the ship's authority figures into absolute chaos. Security guards find her on the deck, and Captain Rose rushes out to inspect the scene alongside Brian Andrews. Rose orders Brian to hack into Mia's phone to see her final live stream, hoping it will explain the mysterious death. The footage reveals that the last person she interacted with before recording her final video was Professor Cochrane, who had aggressively approached her earlier. Captain Rose immediately targets Cochrane as the prime suspect and has him locked away in a private holding room for interrogation. But behind closed doors, the movie exposes the true depth of human corruption. Brian, our elite Navy SEAL, walks into the holding room to speak with Cochrane. It turns out, they are actually criminal partners. Brian has been using his security detail to find wealthy buyers for Cochrane's stolen relics. Brian angrily tells Cochrane that because of this murder investigation, his risk has gone up, and he demands 13% of the profits instead of his usual 10%. They argue back and forth about profit margins and bribes while the ship is literally being hunted by ancient spirits. Cochrane scoffs at the danger, coldly stating that the dead don't care about historical artifacts because they are already dead. He couldn't be more wrong. As soon as Brian leaves the room, the curse strikes back. The ship's main computer systems are completely hijacked by a supernatural force. The throttle valve in the engine room is locked at maximum speed, and the ship changes its course entirely on its own. Captain Rose rushes to the bridge, but her engineers tell her that the system is completely frozen and a manual reboot did absolutely nothing. Rose and Brian head down to the engine room to manually override the throttle, but when they step inside, they find the chief engineer's body. The ghost had manifested out of the steam, used telekinesis to rip a massive, heavy iron valve off the wall, and hurled it like a missile, cleanly decapitating the poor guy. Realizing the engines are about to explode from the immense, uncontrolled pressure, Brian grabs the captain and pulls her outright before a massive explosion rocks the lower decks. The violent jolt sends passengers flying across the luxury ballroom, triggering mass panic. Up on the bridge, the assistant reports that a massive iceberg is directly ahead on their current locked course. The ship is drifting at full speed with zero steering capability. Captain Rose tries to assure the passengers over the PA system that it's just a minor engine failure, but behind the scenes, she is desperately trying to contact the Coast Guard, who informs her that the nearest rescue vessel is at least 2 hours away. The film then transitions into a relentless, claustrophobic nightmare. Inside his locked cabin, Professor Cochrane notices freezing water dripping from the ceiling. The lights go out, and the walls begin to echo with the agonizing screams of the 1912 victims. The ghost manifests in the corner of his room, uses supernatural energy to bind Cochrane's hands to his bedposts, and exhales a freezing, sub-zero breath directly onto his face, driving him to the brink of insanity. When Brian goes to fetch him for further questioning, he finds Cochrane twisted on the floor, weeping and screaming that death itself is inside the ship. Along the corridors, they encounter the mysterious ritual girl. Cochrane panics, pointing at her and accusing her of causing all the deaths. The girl doesn't deny it. She looks at them and calmly explains that ever since her great-grandfather died on the original ship, she only had minor nightmares. But because Cochrane disturbed the graves of the dead and treated their memory like garbage, the spirits have returned to reclaim what is theirs. She looks at Cochrane and says it is his personal curse to watch every single person on this ship die before he does. Within minutes, the ship loses all electrical power, plunging the entire vessel into pitch-black darkness. The guards try to navigate with flashlights, but the ghosts are everywhere, moving through the walls and slaughtering the crew. The ritual girl makes her final move, marching straight onto the main bridge. She uses her supernatural telekinetic powers to hurl the assistant across the room. Captain Rose tries to physically stop her, but the moment she touches the girl, she is hit with a horrifying psychic vision of Captain Edward Smith's frozen corpse. The girl takes total control of the steering wheel, confidently locking the Titanic 3 on a direct collision course with the iceberg. Captain Rose begs her to stop, screaming that committing mass suicide won't bring her ancestors back to life. The girl simply turns around, gives a chilling, beautiful smile, and slashes her own throat right across the control panel, dying instantly. Then comes the final, spectacular disaster. Crash. The Titanic 3 hits the massive iceberg at full speed. The structural integrity of the modern vessel is completely shattered, and millions of gallons of freezing Atlantic water come rushing through the lower decks, casinos, and luxury ballrooms. Total pandemonium erupts as passengers scream and scramble for the upper decks. In the middle of this absolute life and death crisis, Brian proves that his greed has no limits. He runs into the flooding museum hall to steal a bag full of priceless diamonds. But as he turns to escape, Mia's ghost manifests out of the water right in front of him. She uses her dark mind control powers to paralyze his body, forcing him to lift his own tactical pistol, place it against his right temple, and pull the trigger. The evacuation process turns into pure horror. Julie McKenna tries to guide people to the lifeboats, but the vengeful spirits use their telekinetic energy to snap the heavy ropes holding the boats, sending innocent, screaming families plunging hundreds of feet down into the freezing, dark grave below. Captain Rose stays on the ship until the very last second, trying to save whoever she can, but the ocean is unforgiving. Within minutes, the massive Titanic 3 is completely submerged, swallowed whole by the black abyss. The ending of this film delivers one of the most cynical, pitch-black twists in recent horror cinema history. As the chaotic noise of the sinking ship fades away, we are left with a single, lonely lifeboat floating in the dead, freezing silence of the foggy ocean. Inside the boat is Professor Cochrane, shivering from the cold, completely broken by the horrors he has witnessed. Suddenly, he hears a splash and spots Captain Rose swimming weakly in the water. He pulls her aboard the tiny boat. Safe for the moment, Cochrane breaks into this manic, twisted, and historical laughter. He looks up at the foggy sky and screams at the cruel irony of the universe, stating that all the innocent, good people on the ship died, while a terrible, greedy sinner like him managed to survive. Captain Rose tries to calm him down, telling him that he helped people get to the lifeboats at the end, so he needs to let the guilt go and deal with God later. But when she reaches out to touch his shoulder, Cochrane falls completely silent. The freezing hypothermia has already claimed his life, and his body slumps over. But the curse of Titanic 3 does not stop just because a person dies. Within seconds, Cochrane's dead eyes snap open, completely vacant, milky white, and glowing with supernatural malice. His soul has instantly corrupted into a vengeful spirit right there in the small boat. He lunges forward, grabs Captain Rose tightly by the throat with superhuman strength, and drags her over the edge, down into the dark, freezing waters with him. The screen cuts to absolute black, leaving the audience with the terrifying realization that the ocean claimed absolutely every single soul that dared to step on board Titanic 3. It is a brutal, unforgiving, and incredibly dark conclusion to a completely wild cinematic ride. So, now that you know the whole story, let me ask you a serious question. If a real-life eccentric billionaire actually built a fully functioning, luxury Titanic